Alright, boleh nampak skrin saya? This is not.
Boleh Doktor.
Alright, so Assalamualaikum and good afternoon everyone. Lama tak jumpa So for today we will continue with our topic 8 which is bank management and profitability. So under this topic we actually have quite a number of calculations and I will share with you later. Kita tengok this quite a lengthy topic juga. I actually plan to finish it today so that next week kita boleh buat another topic. Tapi tengoklah macam mana kalau if we cannot finish by next week then we'll continue cannot finish this week then we'll continue next week. And then kalau you all perasan nanti 18 January tu Thaipusam public holiday juga. But I will share the video lah untuk topik minggu tu Alright, so we have gone through before the break. We look at commercial banking topic, and then after the break, when you come back, I share with you another topic, which is topic 8, which is offshore banking. So to offshore too, I hope you all have already watched the video and also download the notes because offshore ni you just mainly you can read lah, because kalau kita tengok the offshore ni, the most important point about offshore market is actually the transaction is actually done using foreign currency and not local currency. So kalau kita kata capital market, money market semua tu, we discuss about that and all are actually transacted using local currency ataupun kalau ada forex then local and also forex. Tapi offshore market tu memang the transaction are conducted in foreign exchange only dia tak ada transaction bukan dalam RM tapi dalam foreign exchange lah. Okay. Alright, so for this week, we have bank management and profitability. So here, because you already prepared the sources and uses of funds for commercial banking, we want to know for banks, how do we actually measure their performance? How do we know that that bank is good, that bank is profitable, that bank is making loss, that bank is making profit? So similar to other type of industry, other type of companies, when we assess the company, kita biasa tengok profit kan. We look at the financial statement and we look at the profit after tax. Okay, are they making profit or are they making losses? And we also calculate certain ratio, for example, return on equity. Okay, so kita nak tengok how much is the return that the shareholders get from the business. So similar to bank, we also have ways ataupun kita kata we have certain ratios and also formula in order for us to assess the performance of each bank. And the focus for this topic is actually on conventional bank or commercial banking, right? The focus would be on commercial banking. So the focus of this topic is I listed here, we have capital adequacy framework. So we are going to look at what does it mean by capital adequacy. And then we are going to look at the liquidity management, right? We focus on liquidity, the asset quality, the loan portfolio, and also the loan management. Because we want to know, especially during this pandemic and the last 2 years, we have a lot of, kita ada 3 round of moratorium, bermaksud all those loan ataupun borrowing, you can hold the payment. So tak perlu bayar lagi and then tunggu je. Bila dia buka balik, then you can pay. So dia bagi penangguhan pembayaran moratorium tu. So how does that affect the bank performance? We also want to know because the focus now is actually on the people kan. Okay, kita dapat moratorium lah, kita boleh keluarkan EPF. But what about the other side of the story? What happened to the banks? What happened to EPF, for example kan? Kalau ada banyak sangat withdrawal So for liquidity management, we are going to look at the bank credit process. How do bank actually give loans? How do they assess the customers? Problem loan detection, the red flags, whether certain loan are problematic or whether the borrower can or cannot pay back the loan. And also the loan recovery technique. How do banks make sure that they can get back their loans? Just like when you give your friends pinjam duit kan, macam mana nak minta balik duit kan, masa pinjam tu manis mulut, then bila nak pulang balik tu you kena cari je kita pula minta duit dia kan. So these are also the techniques done by the banks in recovering their loan. And then the next part would be the performance evaluation of the banks, and then we are going to look at the financial statement. So this is where you have to go back to your financial statement of your choice and the banks of your choice, the commercial bank that you choose. Either local bank or foreign bank, and we can look at their financial statements. And the last part would be the ratios. So this is what I meant by when we talk about the performance of the banks. So we are going to look at the profitability, the liquidity, the asset quality of the bank, and also the capital adequacy. So certain ratios are actually relevant to certain type of industries. But for banks, these are the ratios that are actually relevant to the performance of the banks. All right, so first of all is about the bank capital. So we are talking about the liabilities or the liability side of the banks, of the balance sheet of the bank. So here when we look at the capital, it is actually the protection for the depositors and creditors in the event of asset decline. Okay, and the minimum capital is required by a banking institution in order to operate as a going concern entity. So this is the, we are going to look at the statutory reserve requirement as well. Okay, so the requirement set by Bank Negara so that banks can actually maintain or ensure that they have, they operate as a going concern entity. Tak adalah pula the bank ada hari ni, besok dah tak ada, ataupun ada tahun ni, tahun depan dah tak ada. So jarang kita dengar bank bankrupt, company biasa kan, bank no, dia tak ada, because they have to maintain the SRR. Just that a few years back, maybe I think 10 years ago, kita tak ada kata bank to bankrupt, but kita call it as a merger. They merge together. So that's why certain banks macam dah tak ada, dah jadi bank lain. Contoh dulu ada Sabah Sarawak ada Hokkwa Bank, so dia dah merge dengan public bank. Macam contoh lah, atau small bank they merge with a bigger bank to become one entity. Right, we also want to know what is considered as capital, right? So because kita tahu dekat sini the capital is actually to provide the protection for depositors. So what considered as capital? So first of all kita ada equity capital lah, all the stocks, capital, stock, surplus, the retained earnings, undivided profit or retained earnings. We also have reserves. We have preferred stock, so equity capital dekat sini lah. The common stock dekat sini lah. We have also preferred stock. Ini masa you can refer back to our capital market topic, masa tu kita dah buat on capital, equity and also common stock and also preferred stock. And the notes and also debentures. So these are actually the sources ataupun capital of the bank. So they really have to take care of these capital elements. So why do we need to maintain the capital of the banks? Number one is actually to make sure that they can operate. So before deposits and other sources of funds come in. So these are their sources of fund kan. Kita boleh kata sources of fund yang boleh datang daripada macam-macam faktor. Tapi most importantly, they have to maintain their capital. Alright, to promote public confidence, to provide funds for the firm's growth, serve as the regulator of growth, and also sustainable in the long run. Susah lah kalau you depends on other sources kan, tapi tak ada capital. So just like when you want to start a business, you really need to have a capital. Okay, ini tadilah bank has to meet the minimum capital adequacy. Right, ini set by Bank Negara, adequacy against unanticipated shocks such as against interest rate risk, credit risk, and other operational risks. So this will indicate that bank can deliver its products and services efficiently. So from the regulator's point of view, which is from the Bank Negara point of view, so they want to ensure that the stability of financial system and also paling penting to protect depositors, you and me. Kita simpan duit dekat bank, so we want to know that our deposit are or our savings are actually protected. So bank must meet the minimum capital adequacy. So by definition, capital adequacy of financial institution is actually a legal requirement. They must have enough capital to meet all of its obligation and funds the services it offers. Okay, so again, it is a protection for depositors and other creditors, buffer to absorb losses. So if they are making losses, they still have the capital to remain viable. And it also serves as a cushion against any unpredicted operating and financial losses, especially these past 2-3 years, past 2 years, because one thing you because when you read, you know that certain loans they allow for moratorium, which means okay, tak payah bayar lagi 6 bulan. So this actually affect the performance of the bank. Kita tak nampak yang tu, so kita nampak bank just to bank is supporting the needs during this pandemic. But what happened to the bank? then you can see, even if you have the financial statements of your bank, you can also look at their profit. Are they making more profit or are they making less profit? Okay. All right. This is normal, conflict between financial institution and regulator. Of course, kita kata regulatory authority, which is the bank negara and also the government, want the stability in the financial system. Nak stability je. But apa yang financial institution nak? Of course, at the same time, they also want the rate of return to the investment because they are making profits kan, nak tolong orang je. They are also want to make their business profits. So they try to reduce the capital ratio. Capital ratio dia tak nak tinggi sangat, tak nak simpan banyak capital, not good for the business. But the regulator nak macam tu. You have to maintain certain level of capital. So if we go back to the regulatory authority, apa yang dia nak objektif of regulators ni, first of all, of course, dia nak protect the visitors lah, macam yang saya explain earlier tadi kan, nak protect you and me, our savings, the depositors, the deposits, and of course to ensure stable financial system. Okay, takkan stable financial system in a country kalau bank dia semua bankrupt. Okay, what will happen kan? Bank bankrupt takutnya dengar. So to ensure proper structure in the financial system. Alright, so these are some of the conflict. Satu nak stability, at the same time the bank nak higher rate of return. So they have to strike a balance between the stability and also still making profit. Alright, so again, when we talk about capital adequacy, first of all we have to look at the capital, what is capital, and also the form of capital. So again, this is actually presented in the chart before. So funds contributed by owners to a financial firm, money placed in a financial institution in the hope of earning of return in relation to the risk accepted. And the owner's capital contribution can take the form of stock and also annual earning. This is our retained earnings lah. Earnings yang dia pusing balik yang dia tak distribute sebagai dividend. We call it retained earnings. So certain profit ni dia distribute as dividends. Some disimpan, tak ada bagi semua sebagai dividen, dia simpan. Alright, next would be the capital adequacy framework. Kalau tengok tadi the table of content kita ni, we start with capital adequacy. So you really need to know what is capital adequacy for a bank. So they are actually required to comply with the bank negara. So bank negara bagi RWCR ni, risk weighted capital ratio requirements. Tak boleh kurang dari 8%. Mesti 8% at all time. Nampak tak? The syarat is very strict. You have to maintain your weighted capital ratio ni 8%. So nanti later I show you kat mana nak tengok all the percentage so that you can see lah bank mana yang profit dia ataupun kita kata the rate capital dia tinggi, which is good lah. So higher capital ratio signal greater safety or financial strength. So minimum dia 8. Lagi tinggi lagi bagus. So how do we compute RWCR ni, risk weighted capital ratio ni? Capital base divided by total risk weighted asset times 100. Mesti dapat 8 or above. So nanti kita tengoklah kat mana yang you can see the performance of your bank nanti. Oh, your bank sendiri kan. The bank of your assignments tu Alright, so there are several approaches to determine how much capital is required. We know tadi 8% tu is the indicator, the higher the better. Tak semua orang ada 8 most of the bank dia ada belas lah, 12% to be safe kan, more than 8% tu. So these are the measurement. Okay, first of all kita ada ratio approaches. Kita ada capital asset ratio and capital deposit ratio. We also have risk-based capital approach or risk-weighted capital ratio. Ini two different ratios. Kita ada management soundness. This is actually the subjective part, but we can also compute. We have the portfolio analysis, and the other two ni saya tak ada discuss in detail lah. It is actually the form of analysing the bank capital and also the subjective approach. 1, 2, 3, 4 ni objective. We use numbers to evaluate the bank performance. Okay, so number 1 would be the ratio approaches, which is kita gunakan total capital je. So this is capital ratio. Nama dia capital ratio. Yang tadilah formula dia kat sini. Capital base divided by total risk weighted assets. Okay, but this ratio dia ada limitation because kita just ambil total capital without, okay, kita kata just nak tengok relationship between amount of capital Tapi there is no relationship between the capital and also the amount of risk. So remember, different bank dia ada different interest rate, different different credit risk, different liquidity risk. So semua bank dia ada different risk, tapi using this ratio alone, we cannot assess because the risk factor is not taken into consideration in the calculation. They just ambil total capital je. So they ignore the risk structure of the asset. So agak tidak, dia kata limitation lah, agak tidak accurate. So how do we compute this ratio? So according to this ratio, we take all the capital items, we have the stock, the surplus, the retained earnings, and divide by total asset or total deposits. Nampak tak? Kita just ambil the amount je. We don't care berapa banyak loan dia ada, berapa banyak stock debentures dia ada. Kita totalkan je and we divide by the total asset ataupun total deposits. Right? So in this case, contohnya, when you use this formula, you get 10%. So what does 10% mean? So 10% means this is the minimum required ratio used by regulator to study the solvency of the banking system. Okay, sama jugalah. No attempt made to relate the amount of capital to the amount of risk. So nombors just 10%. Okay, that is the 10%. So tak ada, like I said, there is no information about the risk, about the interest risk, about the credit risk. Tak ada, liquidity risk semua tu tak ada. And also risk of unexpected withdrawal at the time. Macam sekarang kan ramai orang withdraw, so we don't know what happened to the bank sebab tak masuk factor withdrawal dalam tu. Or unexpected defaults on loan. Default maksudnya loan tak bayar, defaults on loan. So these are all risks, but not taken into consideration when using this formula. Okay. So because of that limitations in that first ratio, banks also have the risk-based capital approach. Tadi capital je, now risk-based. Kita panggil capital risk asset ratio. Okay, so again, because the focus now is actually on capital. Mungkin you might say that, okay, ada liability dekat banks ni, the uses of funds dia, it can be deposits from customer kan. Tapi again, when we go back to the financial statement, before dia dapat deposits tu, dia mesti ada capital dengan reserve. Then only dia boleh count on the deposits and also other liabilities. So this number two, the approach number two is a risk-based capital approach. So they calculate the ratio, but they take into consideration the risk. Okay, later I'll explain to you about the Basel Accord ni. So Basel ni is actually a committee on bank supervision. Ada 10 country yang join this Basel ni. So they come up with a standard, they come up with the numbers. So bank kebanyakannya follow this Basel Accord standards because they focus on capital risk, market risk, operational risk. They want to make sure that all financial institutions, they have enough capital to meet obligation. Itu paling penting lah. You have deposit money to you. Whenever they want to withdraw the money, you must have the money. Tak boleh kita pergi nak ambil duit kita, alamak duit tak ada kan. Tak pernah jadi macam tu kan. So they have to make sure that this bank ni ada enough capital to meet obligation. Nak bayar hutang dia and also to absorb unexpected loss. Expected loss tu is expected because sekarang tengok the keyword here is to absorb unexpected loss. Expected loss tu is actually the calculated already. They calculated the loss already. But about unexpected loss is something that you don't know, you never expected. But also kena take into consideration this unexpected loss. So that is why this second method ni, they relate the amount of capital to the risk-weighted asset. They call it risk-weighted assets. So certain risk they have higher, certain risk, but certain asset they have higher risk. Certain asset they have lower risk. So kita tengok lepas ni. So to determine the adequacy of the capital under this framework, there are two types of capital adequacy ratios that must be calculated. Satu ada RWCR tadi, risk weighted capital ratio. So the formula is capital base divided by risk weighted asset. This should be times 100 lah, tertinggal pula times 100 times 100. Because the ratio kita akan dapat jawapan dalam bentuk percentage. So how do we compute the capital base? Okay, ada tier 1 plus tier 2. Nanti when you go back to your financial statement, you can see in the notes to the accounts, ada the list of tier 1 and also tier 2. Ini company biasa tak ada, bank je ada macam ni. Ada tier 1 and tier 2 and divide by risk weighted assets. The other ratio is called capital ratio, CCR. CCR ni guna tier 1 capital je. Nampak? The denominator dia sama, risk weighted asset, risk weighted asset. The numerator je berbeza. Satu kita ambil tier 1 plus tier 2. The second formula kita ambil tier 1 sahaja. Okay? Okay, inilah risk weighted asset. Okay, the risk weighted asset ni, kalau kita tengok dekat sini, yang atas ni is the safest category. Ni paling selamat. Nampak? Sebab tu letak 0% je. Yang bawah ni is the riskiest. Ni paling risky. So you understand kan, kalau bank tu dia ada banyak sekali aset yang safest ni, maknanya dia bagus lah. Compared to bank yang atas ni tak ada pun. Yang safe ni tak ada. Dia ada yang bawah ni je, dua bawah ni je. Which is the risky assets. Okay, so riskier, the safer, the better. Kalau kita tengok the performance of the bank, the safer the assets, the better the performance would be. So what are the categories of risk-weighted asset? So first one kita ada the safest ni, cash claims on Federal Government of Malaysia. Claims on Organisation for Economic Cooperations ataupun OECD. So ini liability dia. Ini kira bagus lah sebab dia ada the liability coming from satu, the government. For example, dia ada kita ada MGS, Malaysian Government Bills. Ini masuk kat dalam ni lah, dalam the safest. Second, claims on discount houses and cagar mas berhad. This is also treasury bill, T-bills tu. So safe juga. Okay, sama dengan whatever claim on federal government. Sebab of course you claim dengan government kan. Government punya, of course that is the safest lah. And then also the cagar mas. Cagar mas pun considered as government. So ini semua kalau kita tengok the safest lah. And then number 3 ni, the third category ni. Claim on guarantees on financial institution. Claims on OECD banks. Claim on domestic development bank. Ini untuk kita punya FDI kan. Claim against banks, BSN. Claims against agro bank. So agak safe juga lah. Dekat situ dia kira tengah-tengah lah. Dia makin ke bawah ni makin risky. Satu, loan secured by mortgages on residential properties. Okay, dia bagi loan, the liability dia bagi loan, tapi loan tu secured by mortgage on residential property. So risky. Paling risky is aset-aset lain yang tak masuk dalam kategori ni. So if that particular bank, contohnya bank XYZ ni, dia ada loan dengan bawah ni je. Dia tak ada treasury, dia tak ada MGS, dia tak ada MGP, so dia tak ada. Tak ada yang claim on government, dia tak ada. Dia ada bawah ni je. So dia agak risky, bukan agak risky lah, sangat risky sebab dia tak ada kategori yang dia ada ni, the asset dia ni, dia ada asset. Asset bukan kita kata dia tak ada asset, they have the assets but the asset carry the heaviest risk. Risk dia paling tinggi. Okay, ini saya letak illustration. This is not in your notes. You boleh capture lah kalau nak tengok. I just share with you. This is the risk weighted capital ratio, macam mana nak kira. So we know the formula tadi dekat sini. We know the risk weighted asset mana paling tinggi, mana paling rendah. But when we calculate, contohnya, okay, this is illustration yang straightforward je lah. Saya letak dekat sini risk weight dia, kategori. Nampak kategori tadi kan ada 5 kategori kan, 0, 10, 20, 50 and 100% tadi. This one. So these are the category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then the principal, let's say the amount yang 0% ni dia ada 11 million. Yang second category dia ada 3 million, 300, apa ni, 3 million And then 20% dia ada 7 million, 9 and 40 million. Contohnya. So risk weighted asset dia, kita darab lah. The percentage ni kena darab kat sebelah ni 11 darab sini, 3,000 darab percentage ni. In case you wonder kan, ada kategori ni kan. The percentage ni, ini ialah asset yang dia ada based on the category. So darabkan dia dengan sebelah ni. A multiply by B. So 0, 300, 1.4, 4.5 and 40 million. So ini ialah dia punya risk weighted asset dia. 4, 5, 900, 300. Katakanlah, assuming the capital base, because remember the formula tadi kita nak ambil tier 1, tier 2 kan. Ini saya bagi hypothetically je lah. So the capital dia adalah 7.5 million. The risk weighted capital ratio dia akan jadi 16.33%. So 7.5 million capital divided by nombor bawah ni. Okay. Using the RWCR formula tadi. Alright, so the higher the capital adequacy ratio, the better it is the safety and financial strength of a bank. So under Basel II requirement tadi ni, yang bank punya apa ni, kita kata supervision tadi tu, dia punya ratio mesti tak kurang dari 8%. This is standard. Worldwide dipakai, not only in Malaysia, dipakai juga di tempat lain yang mana gunakan Basel ni lah. Sebab kalau tengok dalam financial statement, Malaysian banks pun report under Basel requirement. No lower than 8%. So this one good lah sebab dia ada 16%. Okay. Sebab nampak dia ada 11 million ni kategori zero kan. The safest dia ada tinggi. Walaupun yang ni dia ada banyak tapi ni pun dia ada banyak. So okay lah. So what are the capital adequacy ratio of Malaysian banks currently? So you can refer to notes to the financial statement under capital adequacy ratio. So bila you download your annual reports ataupun financial statements of the bank, you don't need the whole annual report sebenarnya. You perlukan financial statement sahaja. Right? So you go to the notes to the financial statement, belakang-belakang tu under capital adequacy ratio. So dalam ni dah ada calculation. So you can see and you can determine how many percent ataupun berapa persen is your kita kata the risk weighted ratio for the banks of your choice tu. Saya ada dengan saya I think CIMB kot. Ya, saya tengok. Alright, so this is for CIMB So contoh dia ada dekat sini lah. So we can see the capital adequacy ratio. So common tier 1 ratio dia ada, kita tengok after proposed dividend So kita tengok kat atas ni pun boleh. Okay. So this is notes to the financial statement for the year ended December 2020. Okay. So ada notes capital adequacy. Kat atas ni dah ada calculation dia dah. Tapi saya tak nak tunjuk lah. Dalam ni adalah yang tadi the one that I mentioned about tier 1 capital and tier 2 capital. Ini tier 1 dia. Tier 1 dia all the ordinary shares. Ordinary share ada reserve. Tier 2 dia benda lain lah. But that is the tier 1 and tier 2. So total capital, total tier 2, total tier 1. So for the formula yang tadi tu, it is very easy. You just go to your financial statement, ambil the number ni to plug in and calculate. So contoh macam example saya bagi tadi, kita dapat 60% something kan. So here untuk CIMB ni dia dah calculate dah. Contoh CIMB Islamic dia ada 16.76% which is good Vietnam 73. Ni dia punya subsidiary dia lah. Ini bank dengan group punya. So total capital ratio dia 18% kalau sebelum tolak dividen. Selepas tolak dividen pun 18% lagi. So which means this is good sebab dia lebih dari 8%. So the minimum must be 8%. So kalau you dapat the calculation of the bank tu dapat like 9 ke 10 ke kan, then we should be worried lah what will happen to the bank. Alright, so let's go back to our slide. Okay, so for this one, this is the calculation. So kita tahu the ratio cannot be lower than 8%. And we also know, tadi kita tengok contoh CIMB So CIMB dia 18% something which is good Even calculation kita dalam ni pun dapat 16 kan. So logic lah more than 8%. Alright, so number 1 and number 2 is about the ratio, capital ratio and also risk-weighted asset. Kita ada risk-weighted capital ratio. Okay, number 3 is management soundness. Okay, this is also important to look at how the management of the banks are actually running the bank. So kita nak tahulah what have they been doing to make sure that the bank or the financial system is stable, the bank is doing well. Number 1 is skill and experience of the management team. This is very important. Tak boleh sesiapa je just anybody can join. That is why nowadays, even nowadays, the interview to work in a bank pun, especially departments yang memang memerlukan all the technical skills tu, memang dia sangat tough, sangat tough lah, because they need skills and experience individual to work in that particular bank. So first of all, we're talking about the skill and experience of the management team. So you boleh tengok contoh macam I don't know you all aware ke tak, mungkin juga aware, our finance minister Datuk Seri Zafrul, he was a CEO of CIMB dulu. So dia memang so familiar with the bank, bank punya structure, so how to come up with certain incentive apa semua. So he is in CIMB masa tu. So dulu kita ada Tan Sri Wahid Omar juga dengan Maybank kan. So these are very powerful person. Orang dengar nama, orang tahu dah the skill that they have kan. So very important to have people like that in the management team of that bank. Also, they have to take into consideration the soundness of the institution's management in determining the capital need. So the board of directors is very important. Siapa dalam board of directors tu? Contoh kalau dibaca about public bank, I'm not sure masih lagi Tan Sri Teh Hong Piao ke tak, the chairman. So one of the richest man, richest person in Malaysia kan, dia own public bank. So dia lama, so dia control. So the board of directors semua have to make sure that they are on the same track in making sure that the bank can stand on its own for a long time. So how do we compute the management soundness? Okay, ni pun formula juga. Kita tengok administrative expenses dia dalam financial statement dia juga, divide by total expenditure, which means that from all the expenses tu, berapa banyak dia spend untuk administrative expenses. So here kita boleh tengoklah the quality of management in controlling expenditure and also the operating expenses of the bank. So we want to see the flexibility to change in circumstances, ada tak the technical competence, the leadership ability, how much do they spend untuk administrative expenses will determine are they sound enough in making the decision. So belanja-belanja ni kita boleh nampak macam oh they spend a lot kan, but this actually will help us in looking at the performance of the bank juga. Kita nak tengok the percentage lah. So ini pun sama juga times 100. Kita nak tengok administrative expenses dia over the total expenditure. Number 4 is portfolio analysis. Okay, so portfolio analysis, these are actually the actions. Kita nak tengok lah how do bank actually combine their portfolio and how do they decide, for example, on their loans. So dia akan combine lah portfolio yang ada higher risk and less risk. So bila dia combine dia jadi balance. So the portfolio pun penting juga. For example, katakan satu bank ni buat commercial loan je, satu lagi buat consumer loan. Satu commercial bagi untuk business untuk plant machinery apa semua, satu lagi bagi untuk private. So kalau dua-dua ni merge, satu specialize in benda lain, satu specialize in benda lain, so if they merge, so the total risk will go down. Nampak tak? Yang high risk dengan yang low risk combine, so akan jadi balance. And in this case, the profitability of these two are not perfectly correlated. So the profitability of one area may able to offset the low profits in other area. So consumer loan ni mungkin risk dia lagi tinggi kan daripada commercial. So consumer lagi tinggi, so profit rendah. Tapi bila combine dua-dua ni dia akan jadi balance. Okay, paling penting why we say that whatever the bank decide, whatever the performance of the bank yang kita nak tengok ni, we need also the supervision. Satu, to ensure soundness and stability of the banking sector. So ini biasalah, we need supervision to make sure that the financial system is stable, and also to have a sound capital framework, because we're talking about the capital. So importance of capital adequacy. So this is the first point tadi kan, kita nak tengok the capital adequacy of the bank. So besides deposit from depositors, deposit from customer, apa semua tu, kita nak tengok the capital capital and also reserve. So satu, bila kita dah tahu the capital ni, satu tadi we are looking at the weighted asset. So kita tahu the safest category, which is actually all the claims from the government, the safest, the government for sure will bayar you. And the riskiest category, which is the asset yang tak ada collateral pun, tak ada asset yang tak loan tapi tak ada backup by any assets pun, itu the riskiest. So and also kita ada on and off balance sheet items juga. Remember the last topic kita tengok off balance sheet item kan, item-item yang tak masuk dalam financial statements tapi still ada risk. So what banks has to do is that they have to weight this asset also for risk, so that they know whether the asset to carry which percent ataupun masuk dalam which category. Alright, so measuring capital adequacy. So kita nak tengok amount of capital bank has relative to its exposure to risk or loss. Ini tadi kita dah kira lah, kita tengok bank's capital ratio. So ini kita boleh nampak dalam financial statements. Macam tadi lah under notes number 50 something dah. So again to cover the unexpected losses. Sebab expected loss ni akan cover by reserve dia. So capital ni akan cover unexpected loss. Nampak tak? The way they work so the reserve ni kita guna dulu. Reserve ni termasuklah retained earnings tadi kan, profit yang ada yang you simpan. So kalau ada expected loss, tiba-tiba alamak the business is not doing well, kita guna reserve untuk cover. Tapi kalau tiba-tiba alamak something happen yang kita tak expect, you really need to go to the capital. Susah lah kalau tak ada capital kan. That is why the capital is very important for bank to maintain at least 8% of the capital adequacy ratio. Bawah dari 8% tu tak boleh survive. Next is about Basel Accord tadi yang saya mention. So it is actually a banking supervision accord. Dia recommendation on banking regulation. So semua bank, if you want to survive, if you want to maintain, or you want, biasanya bank, they have to maintain the capital and everything. So they have to follow this banking regulation by this Basel ni. Basel ni dia ada tiga, Basel 1, Basel 2 and Basel 3. So macam tadi, I show you the calculation dekat capital adequacy kan, dia ada Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3 tu lah, kita tak go into detail lah what are those. So they are called Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, BCBS ni, Basel Accord. So they maintain secretariat dekat Switzerland, nama tempat Switzerland. And the committee normally meets there untuk meeting. So dia ada bagi set of recommendation. So yang kita tengok 8% tadi tu is actually recommendation by Basel. Dia dah calculate siap-siap lah. So you must maintain 8%. Bawah daripada 8% you're in trouble. So you must maintain 8%. So this committee lah, Basel Accord ni, dia yang come up with this figure. So these are the difference between Basel 1, 2 and 3. And banks have to report tiga-tiga ni. Right? They have to report based on Basel 1, Basel 2 and also Basel 3. Tapi kalau kita tengok, actually the recent one is Basel 3 lah. Dulu tak ada 2, 3 kan. Dia start dengan 1988. So approach dia lebih nak tengok kepada existing assets. Bila datang Basel 2, dia upgrade sikit, dia nak tengok somewhat forward looking. Dia tengok risk sensitive approach to capital calculation. So the third Basel ni ada lagi lah forward looking. Dia nak tengok in future je kan. So dia nak tengok risk relevant to bank specific portfolio and the macroeconomic environment. Dulu tak ada. Dulu just tengok aset yang ada je. Dia tak tengok in future, for future. So now dia makin bagus. So Basel 3 ni kiranya the next dia version 3 lah. Basel version 3 ni dia forward looking. So for example, the key features macam dulu credit risk only. Dia fix, determine rate, cash 10%, residential mortgage 50%. Very straightforward lah. And then they upgrade to Basel 2 and new season pula. New series. Okay. Ada pillar 1, pillar 2 and pillar 3. Supervisory review, minimum capital requirements, ada 3 pillar approach to risk management. And Basel 3 ni starting 2013 they introduce all the liquidity risk, leverage ratio, stricter data governance and data requirements. Nampak? They really want to make sure that the banks ni memang betul-betul boleh survive. That is why they come up with this Basel 1, 2 and 3. Sekejap Right, so next one would be the liquidity management. Because tadi the first one kita tengok capital adequacy framework. If you go back to our table of content tadi, so for capital adequacy kita dah tengok the different types of ratio, kita dah tengok the different risk weighted assets too, and also we learn about Basel requirement, Basel 1, 2 and also Basel 3. You can find that in your financial statements tu. Macam tadi saya tunjuk this CIMB tu, they have the reporting based on Basel requirements. So next would be liquidity management. So here kita nak tengok about the asset quality and also the loan. What bank must do in order for them to make sure that they can survive. Sama jugalah, bank pun struggle macam other institution. It's just that we do not know macam other companies kan, macam mana dia jaga the capital. Because for banks, dia ada bank negara yang control dia. Not only they have to maintain the percentage tadi, they also have to maintain the reserve requirement with bank negara. So you kena letak certain amount of money dekat bank negara, then only you can survive. So memang dijaga betul lah. Okay. That is why the requirements, the reporting for banks tak sama dengan company lain, dengan industri lain. Alright, so next would be liquidity management. So we want to know what is liquidity management. How do bank decide? Satu tadi we know the capital already. Kita tahu apa benda capital dia tadi. All the common stock, preferred stock and also the claim from the government. And when we talk about liquidity management, kita nak tahu bank ni able to meet tak the anticipated and unanticipated demand for funds. Tadi, the focus for capital adequacy is actually to address the unexpected loss. Betul? Loss yang tak tahu, loss yang tak nampak ni. Loss yang contoh macam loss orang tak boleh bayar balik loan. So now liquidity, kita nak tahu bank ni cukup funds ataupun tidak. The funds ni to meet the anticipated and unanticipated. Like I said, sekarang ni tiba-tiba the withdrawal become high. Semua orang nak withdraw duit. So this is the maybe unanticipated demand kan. Semua orang nak keluarkan duit. So how do banks actually manage their liquidity? Itu tadi kena jaga capital. Capital mesti ada, mesti maintain 8%. At the same time, nak kena maintain the liquidity. Kalau tiba-tiba customer semua nak keluarkan duit, ada tak? And then also loan request. Okay, ada customer nak withdraw duit, ada customer nak buat loan pun banyak, nak withdraw duit pun banyak. So these are anticipated and unanticipated demand for funds. So when we talk about liquidity management, so we are talking about how do banks actually make sure that they have adequate low cost sources of funding. Okay, bank akan make sure dia akan buat benda ni. So satu strategi mesti hold portfolio of assets that can be easily sold. Remember kita semua ada, kita belajar pasal repo apa semua tu kan. So bank ada portfolio of asset that can be easily sold. So bank perlukan cash, so they can own portfolio yang dia boleh senang nak jual. Acquiring large volume of stable liability. Okay, dia boleh beli management. Dia boleh beli Malaysian government securities. Contoh kan MGS. MGS kita tahu tadi is the safest. Dan dia stable. So bank mungkin boleh beli MGS ni banyak-banyak. Okay, untuk liquidity. Beli banyak nak jual balik pun senang. And also they have to maintain a good line of credit with other financial institution. Remember kita belajar awal dulu, bank pun dia ada surplus and also deficit of funds kan. Dia ada surplus, dia bagi pada bank lain. Dia tak cukup, dia ambil dari bank lain. So they have to maintain a very good line of credit so that dia senang dia nak dapat loan dari bank lain. So the liquidity ratio, so again lain dengan ada industri. Sebab kalau liquidity ratio for company biasa, kita akan kira current ratio, kita akan kira asset test ratio kan yang ada inventory tu. Tak tahu you all ingat lagi ke tak kira current ratio, current asset tolak current liability. Contohnya untuk company biasa kan, nak tengok dia boleh rolling the capital ataupun tidak. But for banks ada lain sikit. For example, untuk liquidity ratio, first one is loan to total asset ratio. Kita ambil total loan, kita divide by total assets. It can also be loans to total deposit ratio. Maknanya total loan divide by total asset. Total asset pula. Sorry, total deposit. Total asset kat sini. Ini divide by total asset. And also purchase liability to total asset ratio. Liability apa yang dia beli. and also investment securities maturing in 1 year or less to total asset. So ini nak tengok lah, the liquidity ratio dia, the higher the better. So higher level of loan and higher level of purchase ataupun borrowed liability indicators of a liquid position. Okay. So dia ada banyak cash, dia ada banyak government securities, dia ada banyak securities maturing in 1 year or less. So dia liquid lah. Maknanya liquid maksudnya kalau tiba-tiba ada unanticipated withdrawal kan, orang nak withdraw duit banyak, dia pun boleh lah pergi jual balik all these asset ni so that they can get back the cash. Dan orang boleh withdraw dengan senang hati. And kita tak tahu pun, yang kita tahu, okay, duit saya dekat bank tu ada sekian-sekian, I want to withdraw. We don't care kan. Bank tu liquidity ratio dia macam mana, dia ada government securities ke, dia ada cash banyak ke, we don't care. But again, behind the transaction ni, banks punya perspektif is they have to maintain their liquidity ratio for, macam tadi lah example is kalau ada withdrawal yang banyak ataupun kalau ada customer yang nak buat loan. So semua nak keluarkan duit kan, nak buat loan nak dapat duit, nak withdraw duit nak dapatkan the cash juga. So they have to maintain their liquidity position. So how do commercial banks maintain their liquidity requirements? Okay, they have these reserve requirements. Ada primary reserve and secondary reserve. Kena simpan kena simpan pula. Bank, commercial bank lah especially they have this liquidity. Because we're talking about commercial banks bukan apa because commercial bank ni ada banyak service kan. When you go back to our commercial banking topics tu, dia is for retail kan. So dia bagi kita macam-macam service lah. Ada savings, ada deposits, ada overdraft, ada loans, term loans semua tu, all ada credit card loan. So all those services are actually provided by commercial bank and they really need to maintain their liquidity position. Because we're not talking about development banks. Development bank tak perlu. Development bank dia objektif dia lain. Bukan nak provide service untuk retail. Okay, primary reserve generally held in the form of cash or deposit with BNM. Ini tadi reserve mesti ada dekat BNM. Mesti ada minimum level that must be maintained kan. Okay, ada box cash ni tahu duduk dalam peti besi besar yang setiap bank memang ada tu. Ataupun dia pergi deposit dekat BNM. So mesti they are required by law, by the Bank Negara punya act tu, to ensure the solvency of banking system and to accommodate monetary policy. Okay, that is the primary reserve. Mesti ada in the form of cash. Secondary reserve, okay, it can be T-bills, treasury bills, and also bankers' acceptance. Ini secondary reserve. Okay, sources of liquidity. Alright, so how do bank maintain their liquidity? Tadi kita tahulah dia kena ada reserve, primary reserve and also secondary reserve. Primary reserve dia kena ada vault cash ataupun deposit dengan BNM, and secondary reserve dia kena ada treasury bill and also bankers acceptance. And selain dari liquidity management tu, they also have to identify the sources of their liquidity. So first of all is the new deposit. Penting juga kan, kita kadang-kadang deposit tu ada je tapi tak ada new one. Semua customer lama, tak ada customer baru yang pergi buat new deposit. So new deposits are very important for banks, especially when we talk about new deposit. We're talking about fixed deposit, investment accounts. For Islamic bank dia panggil investment account, dia tak panggil fixed deposit. Savings account, current account. So with these deposits ni lah ongoing, yang kita kata ongoing ni. So bank have to compete. You nak simpan duit dekat bank mana? Nak pergi bank, nak pergi CIMB ke? Nak pergi bank Islam ke? Nak pergi Maybank ke? Nak pergi Affinbank ke? So we want the best ataupun kita nak the package yang paling best lah untuk kita kan, to our needs that can meet our needs. So ada attractive rate kita nak. So that bila bank pun kita dapat compete among themselves, kita pun boleh pilih okay bank mana kita nak pergi letak duit. Why they need these new deposits? Again, this is supply and demand kan. Kalau ada new deposit masuk, kalau ada withdrawal pula, so dia boleh cover. Nak cover balik all the withdrawals, they need new deposits. So logic ni macam tu lah kan. To recover the withdrawals, the bank needs the new deposit. So new deposit ni bila dah banyak duit masuk, dia nampak the relationship dia. Duit masuk orang simpan, orang nak withdraw pun ada duit lain, dan dia nak bagi loan pada other customers pun ada because of this new deposit. That's why how they roll the kita kata the sources of fund dia. So new deposits is very important. And then ada maturing assets. Maturing assets ni contoh untuk short term instrument. Short term securities, dia ada repos, dia ada bankers acceptance, dia ada all the short term instruments tu. Kita kata maturity of assets lah. So kalau dia ada yang short term ni, dia kena monitor. So mature je retire, so they get the cash kan. So kita nak tahu jugalah because dia kena balance jugalah. Not all asset mesti short term, dia mesti ada long term juga. Ni semua short term semua dia retire kan. Kita tengok dia tak ada asset, so semua asset dah retire. So they must have a balance juga for maturing asset ni, balance between short term instrument and also long term instrument. Short term securities and long term securities. Selling of assets, again these two are related. Maturing asset dengan sale of asset ni, because we're talking about short term instrument. Okay. And why do we need to know about the sale of assets ni? Because they really have to keep track which asset mature. Let's say bulan 1 ni asset apa yang mature, bulan 2 asset apa yang mature. So they have to monitor to make sure that every time dia mature je, dia dapat the liquidity, dia dapat the cash. So bila dia dapat the cash, dia boleh bagi new loan contohnya. So they have to monitor lah untuk yang ni to make sure that they are readily available. Borrowed funds. Borrowed fund ni bank borrow from other banks. Even from BNM, they can also borrow from bank negara. Tapi nak borrow fund ni bergantung kepada credit limit juga. Jangan ingat customer je ada credit limit, bank pun ada credit limit juga. So you nak simply pinjam je, dia mesti ada line of credit yang bagus. Pinjam kena bayar balik lah. So kalau pinjam tak bayar balik pun not good line of credit, so dah susah nak pinjam. Sebab bank negara sangat concern about this. Dia allow borrowing tapi dia control ada credit limit between banks sebab tak naklah heavy borrowing kan. Nanti heavy borrowing, bank, imagine what happen if bank banyak borrow among bank, interest rate akan naik. Ni balik cerita interest rate kan, kita dah belajar base lending rate semua tu. So ada credit limit and ini bank negara control. Okay. Alright, next, for liquidity management, not only bank have to identify their sources of liquidity, have to identify their reserve, they also have to have, katakan sebagai ALCO, Asset and Liquidity Management Committee. Ada satu komiti besar ni, apa kerja dia? Kerja dia ialah to manage bank assets and liability, to balance it many risk exposures and thereby help it achieve its operating objectives. You should understand those top gun dekat banks ni, their salary is very high. Average of 30 to 40,000 per month. Ni kita bukan cakap pasal fresh grad, we're talking about the experience and the management level ni yang memang responsibility dia memang sangat tinggi, and that is why bank pay them a lot of money. So orang kata kalau nak duit banyak pergi kerja dekat oil and gas atau bank kan. Bank pun if you start tu mungkin tak banyak lah. After a while you dah boleh climb up the corporate ladder tu, and they will pay you a very handsome amount of money because the risk is very high. So this committee, the function is to balance the risk exposure. So dia kena tengok berapa banyak short term instrument bank ni kena ada, berapa banyak long term instrument bank ni kena ada, so that they have to strike a balance to make sure that liquidity position tu macam tu je and then bank tak exposed to kita kata bankruptcy risk. So apa ALCO ni buat? Dia manage asset and liability. So again bila kita kata asset and liability, dia manage all the deposits, all the borrowing termasuklah probability of liquidity shocks and interest rate scenario. Dia tengok yang ni. Position the bank to handle the most likely of this scenario at minimum because they have to handle this issue kalau ada, the liquidity problem kalau ada, but they have to make sure that it will be done at a minimum cost. And also they will allocate the bank remaining assets and liability to meet risk and probability objectives. So nampak macam simple je kan, bunyi function dia 4 je, very simple but it is very tough. That's why semua bank ada ALCO ni, kena ada to manage asset and also liability. Alright, so far so good. So hari ni kita cerita performance of the bank je. Performance of you as student senang tengok CGPA je kan. Tengok bank ni tadi kita dah tengok capital dia. Now kita dah tengok liquidity dia. Third one kita nak tengok asset quality dia. Yeah, do they have a good quality assets ataupun tidak This is still under liquidity management lagi. Liquidity lagi sebab kita tengok asset. Because when we talk about like liquidity, we are talking about asset and liability. Okay, so masih lagi dekat liquidity tu. Tadi kita dah start dengan capital kan. Okay, kita dah tengok ratio. So number 2 kita ada liquidity. So tadi kita dah tengok the sources dia. Saya bukan apa buat macam ni saya takut nanti you all lost bila sampai sini. Ini topik yang mana? Okay, so this is where to position this topic, this subtopic. So kita dah tengok sources dia. So now kita nak tengok the asset dia. Under liquidity kita tengok asset dia pula. Okay. Asset quality, this is actually related to the first point. Kita tengok capital tadi, kita kata kita ada risk weighted asset kan. So when we talk about asset quality, we are talking about the level of risk associated to a particular asset. Contohnya asset, dia asset tapi dia ada credit risk, loan and advances. Alright, so you also membuat presentation hari tu ataupun kita dah tengok the sources and uses of funds of commercial banks kan, paling tinggi ialah loan and advances. Okay, tapi loan and advances ni they have this credit risk. Apa credit risk tu? Risk that the borrower will not able to pay back the loan kan. Okay, kita shock bagi loan. Okay, bank yang ada banyak loan ialah bank yang bagus. Tapi they really have to manage the loan to make sure that loan tu bukan default. So very important for any financial institution that offer loans and advances to have a proper system in controlling and monitoring credit risk. You all tak ada hutang lagi tak apa but when you start je nanti dia ada a very proper system untuk bayar hutang. That is why they make it very convenient for the customer to pay back their loan. Potong gaji boleh, pergi bayar dekat ATM boleh, bayar through credit card boleh, bayarlah macam mana pun. Dia make it convenient so that you tak ada reason kenapa you tak nak bayar. Okay, kalau macam dulu, long time ago lain lah, you nak bayar hutang, you have to go to the bank directly. Nak bayar hutang credit card Citibank contohnya dulu-dulu kan, I'm talking about 20 years ago. You have to go to the bank, pergi ATM dekat bank tu, bayar credit card. Tempat ni tak boleh buat. Macam tu sekali. So, to make things convenient to the customer, they try to do a lot of things to improve so that bank yang bagi loan and advances ni, dia boleh control and monitor the credit risk of the customer. So, the lower credit risk means better quality of asset. Okay, loan and advances banyak, and the quality ataupun the control pun bagus. So the credit risk tu kita kata ada, the credit risk is lower. Alright, so how do we assess the level of credit risk? It depends on the satu diversification of the asset portfolio. Tadi kan kita were talking about the short term, long term instruments kan. So the diversification, yang higher risk ada, yang low risk ada, short term ada, long term ada. So that will balance out the risk tu. And the regulation, regulation or rules put in place to limit the credit risk. Okay, apa regulation yang ada? Okay, and then the regulation termasuklah not only after the bank has given the loan to the customer, it also includes the steps taken before they grant the loan to the customer. Sebab tu ada credit check kan, ada security-tos semua tu. Itu actually to check the customer before the bank grant the loan. Dah bagi loan, tak boleh buat apa dah. Kena collect duit je kan. Before bagi tu, dia memang akan monitor. And also the efficiency of operations. Evaluation lah. So this one is the evaluation of application. Like evaluate orang yang apply and then monitor orang ni bayar ke, tak bayar ke. Okay. The efficiency of operations. So when we talk about asset again, we are talking about asset quality, we're talking about the loan and advances. Right, so loan and advances ni, what is loan? Kena tahu dulu lah loan ni apa kan. Ini kan go back to your notes last time, kita dah letak different types of loan yang ada, even the bank of your choice ada macam-macam loan, term loan, personal loan, computer loan, hire purchase. So it is an arrangement where a borrower obtain funds from a lender to finance its business. Okay, kita pinjam dia untuk buat something. Okay, so the funds are obtained in exchange for an agreement to repay the funds later with interest of finance charges. So ni konsep dia macam tu lah. We need funds, we go to the bank, we borrow funds from the bank, we pay back the funds later. Okay, dia bagi kita tempoh 10 tahun, 7 tahun, 5 tahun. We pay back the amount with interest. Dia kata finance charges tu. And kita ada term NPL, non-performing loans ataupun default loan. Kalau dia tak bayar more than 3 months, akan jadi default lah. Masuk dalam aging report sebagai NPL. So the higher NPL is not the better. Tak bagus lah, because bank kalau boleh dia tak nak ada loan default kan. Dia nak semua orang bayar je. So ada je NPL ni, habis dia kejar lah. Alright, so we have two categories of loan. Secured and unsecured. Okay. Right, so secured loan, loans that are backed up by assets or collateral and lender has first claim if default occur. Pergi buat hutang, cagarkan rumah. Itu maksud secured loan. You get the money, bank pegang the rumah. If you cannot pay back the money, bank ambil balik rumah. Biasanya berlaku kalau loan rumah lah. Loan rumah, you make loan with the bank untuk beli rumah. You duduk rumah tu sekarang kan, but you cannot pay back the loan to the bank. So the collateral is the house. You cannot pay, you kena keluar, bank akan ambil rumah tu. Dan bank akan lelong lah. So biasa kita nampak rumah, bank lelong kan. Itu maksudnya dia ambil rumah yang orang customer tak boleh bayar and dia lelongkan at a lower price normally to get back the loan. Okay, itu secured loan. Dia mesti backed by asset or collateral. Backup by tanah ke rumah ke, the real property lah biasanya. Or unsecured loan. Ada loan yang not backup by any assets. Contoh kalau loan rumah, loan kereta pun asset by backed by the car lah. You beli kereta, bayar loan dekat bank, bila dia tak dapat bayar, bank tarik balik kereta. Itu maksud dia. So dia ambil balik. Itu ialah collateral. Dia ambil balik dan dia jual lah. To cover back the loan yang dia dah bagi. There are certain loans that are unsecured, not backed by any asset, clean basis. So lender has general claim to asset of borrower if default occurs. Ini general claim je. So tadi kalau dia ada back by kereta, back by rumah, back by tanah, dia tak boleh bayar je, terus bank ambil benda tu. Now unsecured, tak ada lah. So you have to pay juga macam mana pun. Sebab, tapi tak ada asset yang bank akan ambil because the loan ialah unsecured. Okay, we also have overdraft facilities. Ini pun kita dah pernah tengok hari tu kan, dah berkenalan dengan overdraft ni, which is facility for current account holder. Okay, so allow for insufficient account to be debited, allowing or overdrawing up to a specified approved limit. So biasanya customer bagi check tapi account tu ada insufficient fund kan. So this is for business lah, for working capital requirement, and also subject to periodic review on conduct of account. Okay. Next is term loan. Term ni ada term, maksudnya dia ada period of time. Term loan 7 years, 10 years, 20 years. And also it can also be a series of loan on specified dates. So the purpose, ini memang ada purpose lah, to acquire machinery or equipment, untuk renovation, untuk debt financing. Dia bukan untuk day-to-day operation. Day-to-day operation biasanya business akan ambil yang overdraft facility tadi. So the repayment can be in the form of single payment or installment basis. So let's look at the car loan. Car loan is a term loan. So bila installment dia based on monthly. So every month you have to pay the loan. And in this case, the term loan ni dia ialah ada collateral. Sebab kita gunakan loan ni untuk beli something kan. Nampak? To acquire something. So normally kita beli loan untuk acquire asset ni akan jadi the collateral. Akan di sebagai collateral lah back, loan back by assets. as a collateral. And normally the collateral would be the purchase asset tu. Tak kisahlah you purchase apa, dia akan jadi collateral. Alright, so bank's protection on term loan, dengar macam okay, very easy to get a loan. So what bank has to do is that the amount of loan must be less than the value of assets. That is why biasanya you want to make a car loan ke term loan. Let's say you nak beli something yang berharga 100,000. Loan, bank akan bagi loan sebanyak 90,000 only. Less than value of the asset. This is the asset value kan? 100,000. Bank hanya bagi loan 90,000. Another 10,000 tu you kena cari sendiri on your own. Dia tak bagi semua. Okay, why? Because they want to protect kan. So dia loan 90,000 je. So nanti let's say orang ni tak boleh bayar, dia ambil balik asset tu. Jadi dia rugi 90,000 je lah, tak adalah rugi the whole value kan. And the maturity loan should not exceed the economic life of the asset. That is why if you make a higher purchase ataupun car loan, maximum is 9 years. Sebab after 9 years kita tak boleh pakai, dah hancur, right? So the loan will be up to 9 years only. That is why loan need should not exceed the economic life of the asset. Kereta 9 years. Kalau rumah boleh sampai 30 years. Rumah tak apa kan, long term. Kereta tak, maximum 9 years. Sebab economic life of an asset, economic life of a car, 9 years je. Actually before 9 years pun dah teruk kan. Okay, trade finance products. Okay, ini antara produk yang bank ada juga under loan and advances. Ini kita dah tengok masa kita buat tajuk apa itu, kita buat money market kan. Ada letter of credit, undertaking by the bank, effect payment based on documents, ada trust receipts, ada shipping guarantee. Ini semua trade finance produk. Ada bankers acceptance. Semua konsep ni sama macam bankers acceptance. I think last time kita tengok bankers acceptance je. So konsep dia sama, shipping guarantee, bankers acceptance. Sebab nak tunjuk je lah, okay, ini ialah bill of exchange, customer ni nak finance on bank, bank dah accept, so boleh guna untuk import and export. So trade finance memang biasanya untuk import and export. Alright, before I move on to bank credit process loan cycle ni, I think we now dah 3:15. We take a very short break, 5 minutes break, and we'll come back and I'll continue with loan life cycle. Then we can complete je lah this topic kalau macam ni. Alright, I'll see you in 5 minutes. Alright, okay, kita sambung this is on bank credit loan, bank credit process or loan life cycle. Alright, so for this one, we have to look at the different types of loans and secured and also unsecured loans, and then kita dah tengok tadi the trade finance products and the bank's protection on term loan. So we want to know about the credit process or loan life cycle. So for this part, there are certain procedure or process, a general process that bank has to go through in order for them to release the loan to the customer. All right. So for this one, the first step is actually business development and marketing. Okay, so this is when they first come up with the idea of certain product. When they have idea for certain product, and then this is where they actually discuss about it and they do the promotion, they do the marketing. So here we have the business development and also marketing done by the bank. Okay, so dekat sini they introduce lah to us the new product through the flyers and websites, the advertisement dia, including the promotion and marketing. Next one is the credit evaluation process. So here, this is where the credit application ataupun kita kata credit analysis comes in. Ini tadi dah buat promotion kan, lepas buat promotion adalah customer datang buat application. Okay, credit analysis. Alright, so here under this credit analysis ni, what bank will do is that they will evaluate the application. Okay, so this is actually for this credit analysis stage ni, this is the most important stage as the application for loan comes in. So they mesti make sure that satu, they have the sound lending policy. What is the policy for borrowing untuk the customer? Dia mesti adalah umur berapa ke, kerja gaji kena berapa. You know, that is the policy of the banks. To ensure less chances of loan default. Of course, we want to know kan, bagi pinjam duit, so bank wants to make sure that the borrower will be able to pay back the amount. So they have here kita kata tadi they must have a lending policy. They must have a very good lending policy. And then after that, when they want to come up with a certain policy, they mesti come up with kita kata kita ada 5C ni. The credit evaluation process is done using this 5C. First one is the character. So dia akan tengok lah you as the customer, your honesty, your integrity, your background. Are you able to pay back the loan? So dia akan evaluate the character. And number two, collateral. Is the loan need the collateral? Perlukan secured asset ataupun unsecured asset. So this is about the person, the collateral, about the loan, how much you want to borrow, and does the loan perlukan collateral ataupun tidak. The capacity, this is the cash flow. The capacity is about the cash flow, which means are you able to pay back the loan? Do you have enough cash to repay? Okay, you kerja macam mana? Dia nak tengok bank statement, nak tengok the salary slip to make sure that you are able to pay back the loan. Capital, tengok juga your personal assets. Dia ada asset apa? Your savings, ada savings dekat mana? Sometimes they will dig until that information nak tengok ada enough capital ataupun tidak. So if you're doing business, dia nak tengok the condition of your business juga. Right? Because here we are talking about not only individual, also a business. So for a business, they will also look at the condition of the business. Adakah business to industry ni okay? Business, katakan you business dalam tourism, sekarang tak bagus macam hari tu kan. Sekarang tak bagus during COVID ni, hotel semua tutup, but your business is in hotel industry. So dia akan tengoklah the business tu macam mana. Ataupun now business you is restaurant. Okay, restaurant boleh operate. Contoh. So the condition of the business. And then dah fulfill all these 5 criteria ni, all these 5 C's ni, barulah loan documentation. Okay, dia kata okay, alright, sesuai orang ni, boleh dia bagi loan dekat orang ni because they fulfill all these characters. So after this kita pergi kepada loan administration ataupun loan documentation. So this is the loan administration lah, documentation ataupun Administration. So here dekat sini dia start lah dengan approval dia macam mana, dah approve bila. So dalam approval tu ada term dia, term nak bayar term nak bayar, and then the customer mula-mula when you get the agreement, baca dulu, okay, setuju ataupun tidak dengan agreement. Let's say this is loan, this is the interest rate, this is the amount that you have to pay every month, this is the last payment, semua tu dekat dalam agreement. So the customer can review for the loan documentation, okay, and then kita kata bila dah approve everything, loan disbursement, keluarlah duit, okay. You nak buat personal loan kan, dah settle semua personal loan, okay, boleh bayar orang ni, ada salary slip contohnya. So dah layak untuk diberi loan, adalah loan agreement, dah setuju dengan agreement, dah sign, dah pulang balik dekat bank, then bank will disburse the money. Let's say you want to borrow 100,000, so bank will give you that, will disburse the money 100,000, and bank kata okay, payment will be made every 1 hari bulan setiap bulan. Okay, so sampailah duit dah dapat, and then duit nak bayar kan. So sampai dekat loan administration ni, ini akan especially for business, kalau dekat sini ini dikira monitoring lah. Dekat sini monitoring. Okay, sini ialah monitoring. Sebab sekarang ni you pass this stage kan. You tengok produk tu you nak, and then you pass the 5C, and then you baca, you setuju, and then the bank already disburse the money. Now bank nak monitor. Orang ni nak bayar ke tak ni kan. Okay, the monitoring. So dekat monitoring ni, what bank will do is that dia akan review lah the terms condition Katakan, because like I said, this is not only, this cycle ni not only for personal loan, not only for car loan, termasuklah overdraft sekali. Overdraft facilities tu, the current account tu, if you're doing business kan, you nak overdraft facilities, dekat sini bank will review. Okay, sesuai tak bagi orang ni overdraft 50,000. Bila tengok, okay, bagus dia ni kan, dia sentiasa pusing dia the capital, bank actually can choose to increase. Okay, 50,000 overdraft, bank naikkan, nak naik 100,000, nak tak? Macam tu. Ataupun, jarang diturunkan, biasa dia nak naikkan lah. Ataupun dia bagi you credit card, dia tengok, oh after setahun ni pandai guna and bayar. So dia tanya pula, okay, kita nak naikkan credit limit, nak tak? Nampak tak The monitoring tu done using research So masa dia monitor ni, dia akan review lah the credit facility tu, tengok boleh nak tengok orang ni fully utilize ataupun tidak the loan tu. And bayar ke tak. So kalau loan is performing means bayar tak pernah miss memang the loan is performing. Sometimes tu dia kalau tak ada miss, tak ada apa, dia akan habis dekat sini lah. So dia monitor lah, nampak tak? Dia ada 5 step dia akan monitor dekat sini je. Let's say you bayar okay, bagus je semua kan, you won't go to this stage, you habis kat sini dekat monitoring dia. So bayarlah sampai let's say hutang 9 tahun lah dia monitor you, sentiasa bayar, and then you finish at this. Okay, what happen is if ada default, tak boleh bayar. Sekarang kita faham bila boleh bayar, you will stop here. But what happen if the loans are bad? Loan recovery ni hanya pergi dekat bad loans. Bad loans. So good loans, performing loans akan habis dekat sini. Titik dekat sini. Finish. End. Bad loans masuk step lain. Okay, for bad loans untuk loan recovery ni, biasanya kalau tak boleh bayar. Bila tak boleh bayar, let's say sebulan dapat notice, tak boleh bayar. Bulan kedua dapat notice, tak boleh bayar. Bulan ketiga dah nak masuk default kan. Dah masuk default, what bank will do is try to recover the loan lah. Orang ni tak bayar dah 3 bulan kan, bank nak duit dia. So they try to recover. What do they do? Okay. Biasanya kalau lah bulan pertama tak boleh bayar, bulan kedua tak boleh bayar, bulan ketiga bayar. Okay, dia tak perlu proceed dia monitor. Bulan pertama tak bayar, bulan kedua dia dah boleh bayar. So dia monitor juga. Bulan ketiga tak boleh bayar, bulan keempat boleh bayar pula. Dia monitor lagi. Dia will make sure that you akan bayar. Walaupun miss, dia akan make sure that you will pay. What happen if memang problem, memang tak boleh bayar, memang no payment at all. Call tak dapat, pergi cari kat office tak ada, cari kat rumah tak ada. Tak dapat ni okay, semua tak ada. So bila macam ni, no payment at all, maknanya still bad lah, no payment at all dia akan masuk stage loan recovery. Kalau bayar tadi masih lagi dekat sini if the customer pay lagi, walaupun lewat 2 bulan, 3 bulan, dia akan monitor. Dia tak pergi ke sini. Tapi kalau dah tak bayar langsung, dia akan masuk kat sini lah, loan recovery. So loan recovery ni bank akan fikir apa nak buat untuk dapat balik duit dia. If orang ni ialah businessman, bank akan fikirlah adakah nak file bankruptcy dekat orang tu. Sebab loan hutang tak bayar kan. Bank boleh apply for bankruptcy untuk that particular customer. Ataupun nak ambil, nak tutup bisnes. Pergi letak apa benda tu. Dia pergi, kita kata foreclosure dia pergi tutup bisnes tu dah tak boleh buka dah. Sebab apa? Hutang tak bayar. Ataupun enforcement of guarantee, pergi cari guarantor kena bayarkan. Tu malang dia if you become a guarantor untuk loan So bila dekat sini loan recovery stage ni, dekat sinilah bank akan steps yang dia akan take untuk make sure the loan is recovered. Okay. Di sebelum sampai loan recovery stage ni, they are actually, kita kata, okay, ini good collateral kita cerita good collateral dulu. Stability in value, right? Again, if the loan is done ataupun is made to purchase certain assets, so that asset will become the collateral. Has high liquidity value and ability to withstand wear and tear. Ini good collateral. Tak boleh lah kata saya nak pajakkan saya punya koleksi stamp. Tak boleh. So importance of collateral, reduce the bank's risk. Okay, second line of defense. If the loan turns bad, bank akan pergi kepada collateral tu dulu. Hutang kereta tak bayar, bank tarik kereta. Hutang rumah tak bayar, bank ambil rumah. Okay, itu second line of defense. Tapi untuk aset yang tak ada collateral, susah sikit lah. Okay. So example of collateral, real estate, property, real estate property, and also shares. Tapi more preferable collateral sebab real estate lah. Remember, value dia stable kan, harga rumah, harga kereta lebih stable daripada harga shares. Contohnya share hari ni harga tinggi, besok dah turun. So shares boleh juga jadi collateral kalau amount dia banyak. Tapi depends lah, depends on certain banks needs. Okay, red flag. Go back to this one tadi, loan recovery ni. Masa monitoring ni, during this stage monitoring ni, loan administration ni, during this stage kalau ada something wrong, bank will detect through these red flags. Early detection. So dia ada sistem. Sebelum loan tu jadi bad, bank ada sistem untuk reduce ataupun control the NPL. So it can be categorized into 3 areas. Operations of the account, operation of the business, kalau orang tu ada business, and also threats in the changing environment. Okay, so ini contoh red flags. Katakanlah this is a business ataupun we talking about business lah. We talk about business. Katakan account operation, persistent delay in interest servicing. Okay, dia kena bayar, remember nak bayar balik kena ada principal plus interest. Paling-paling bank, the borrower kena bayar interest dulu. Sekarang ni interest pun dah low, tak bayar. Okay, ni contoh, one business ni interest tak boleh nak bayar. And then business pula one person management je, dia tak ada staff, tak ada apa, dia sorang-sorang je buat semua. Ni dah red flag juga. Environment, katakan lebih susah the legislation untuk that particular industry. Ni red flags ni, bank akan monitor lah this business apa ni, kita kata properly ataupun failure to adhere to principal repayment schedule, tak boleh bayar. This is the account according to the account itself, the loan account tu tak bayar service, tak bayar interest, tak boleh bayar principal, bayar check tapi fund tak cukup, nak communicate pun susah, call tak dapat, pergi office tak ada delay in submitting financial statements. Ini dah red flags. Buat the business pula, kalau business tu one person management ataupun no management succession, frequent changes of auditor, tiap tahun tukar auditor, ataupun auditor daripada auditor besar dia pergi ambil auditor XYZ je. So kita nampak dah lower dia punya standard kan. Ataupun profit dia declining, okay, something is not good. So bank akan berjaga-jagalah because these are all the red flags. For environment, changing demand or trend. Okay, sekarang demand untuk sanitizer, untuk facial mask kan. So bagus. Tapi kalau business tu bukan, changing demand dah tak ada untuk business-business yang macam tu, then bank akan monitor closely lah. Changes in entry barrier, drastic change in nature of demand due to changes in technology and demand. Okay, so these are all the red flags yang banks will have to pay extra attention to. Okay, sambungan dia, second table, kita ada failure to comply with covenants ataupun especially financial covenants, lateness in submitting audited accounts, communication difficulties, ni no proper accounting records, terus ni kan method of stock valuation, stock tak value pun, sepah je. Environment, overall changes in marketing and global competition, changes in technology. Okay, so ini semua red flags. Alright, ini tadi step yang saya simpan dulu for this one tu, loan recovery. Okay, apa bank akan buat kalau sampai ke step ni, loan recovery? Ada red flag ni, tak nak buat apa dah, memang the business tak boleh nak bayar the loan, bank akan pergi kepada loan recovery techniques. So what they have to do is, number one is, satu, they come up with CWA, Cooperative Workout Agreement. Okay. Ini after they notice the red flags tadi, let's say red flag tadi tu semua bank dah notice kan, dia akan start dengan ini dulu. Okay, dia kata, Anis, jom kita discuss about your payment. Awak ni dah 2-3 bulan tak bayar ni kan. Let's discuss. Ni early stage lah, baru 2 bulan tak boleh nak bayar, dia dah tanya. Okay, apa step yang kita boleh buat kan, dah ada red flag ni, dah lambat bayar. So, dia negotiate lah, dia akan negotiate. Okay, lebih kepada negotiation process. So dia non-legal, so customer boleh follow ataupun boleh kalau tak nak follow. So bank kata okay, kita restructure awak punya hutang ni. Instead awak bayar sebulan 500, awak bayar sebulan 200 je. Macam PTN kan, dia restructure juga the payment. So bank akan panggil borrower, akan discuss dulu. Nama dia CWA. But sometimes the customer boleh follow lah. Kalau tak boleh follow, then bank akan fikir apa lagi the next step kalau tak boleh follow. Ini kiranya CWA ni tak involve court bank dengan borrower je, belum masuk court, belum masuk third party So katakan dalam ni, dalam CWA ni apa yang boleh buat ialah corrective measure lah. Contoh boleh modify the terms of agreement kan, macam saya kata tadi lah, let's say you bayar 500 sebulan, dia kata okay, kita kurangkan 300 je sebulan, tapi tempoh akan jadi lebih panjang. Okay, boleh restructure loan amortization schedule, boleh liquidate unnecessary asset. Dia tengok the business, okay, awak ada aset-aset yang tak penting ni, apa kita jual je. Jual so that you can get the cash and you can pay back the loan. Ataupun bank boleh request additional collateral. Okay, awak bagi rumah je, saya tengok awak ada rumah 2, awak letak rumah 1 je sebagai collateral. Nak yang lagi 1 tu juga. Okay, this is the corrective measure under CWA ni. Restrict investment activity, dia kata okay, jangan melabur kat saham-saham yang fluctuate sangat ni, yang high risk ni jangan. Right? So this is the advice given by the banks under the first step, the collective workout agreement or cooperative ataupun collective workout agreement. Bank and borrower akan discuss. Okay, second one, collateral liquidation. Tak jadi buat the first step tadi tu pun never change. So dia tak boleh juga nak serve the interest, tak boleh juga nak serve the principal. Okay, so what bank will do is collateral liquidation. Ambil balik rumah, lelong. So that bank dapat the cash. Okay, they convert all charge security into cash to repay the loan balance, including the interest due. Okay, so ini dia memang dah convert lah all the charge security, sebab semua tu is bank, kita kata collateral dah jadi bank punya, so dia boleh ambil untuk serve the remaining of the loan yang tak boleh bayar. Okay. The third one is enforcement judgment. Ini kalau tadi first step CWA tu tadi customer tu buat tak tahu je. Bank dah bagi dia bayar kurang, bank dah ubah dia punya schedule nak bayar, dia tak buat. Bila dia tak buat, maknanya bila dia tak buat, maknanya dia still tak buat payment. Bila dia tak buat payment, bank akan pergi ke sini lah, enforcement judgment. So for borrowers who ignore the bank's proposal on CWA tadi, ataupun ada security value not sufficient to cover principal and interest due. Katakanlah dia punya hutang dah jadi 5 million, rumah yang dia cakapkan tu nilainya 500,000 je. Nampak tak? Ada lagi 1.5 million tak boleh bayar. So apa bank will do is settle dekat court lah. Okay, sebab dah yang dia ambil collateral tak cukup tak cukup untuk cover. So dia perlukan duit lagi. So they will reduce debt to judgment and enforcement and also collection. Okay. So dekat sini dia legal proceeding Ada 2 step ni This is legal proceeding. Saman lah masuk court. Okay. So for this one, legal proceeding so that the loan can be paid off. Jangan main-main bunyi nak buat loan, saya takut dia kan. But if you can pay, tak ada masalah. If you cannot, then akan jadi sampai macam ni lah. So bank will take legal proceeding, okay, judgment. So judgment ni kita kata legal document, legal document obtained through the process of court order. Akan keluar court order. Okay, court order confirm the obligations and claims of the parties. Dalam court order ni katalah, okay, sekian-sekian bank XYZ ni akan ada claim ataupun orang ni hutang sekian-sekian amount and bank berhak untuk claim certain amount of money based on loan yang dah dibuat pada tahun sekian-sekian tu. So apa yang kena buat ialah the borrower's income dengan asset tu dia akan kira lah berapa banyak. So dia akan tengok apa teknik nak ambil balik duit tu. Katakanlah hutang ada 2 million. Asset yang you ada harganya 1 million je. Asset dengan dan income So boleh bayar 1 million je. Lagi 1 million tak boleh bayar. That's why kat situ lah bank will file for bankruptcy. Sebab you hutang bank 2 million, you tak ada duit dah nak bayar. You boleh bayar 1 million je. 1 million lagi tu memang tak boleh bayar. Tak ada sumber dah nak bayar. Bank will declare you as bankrupt. So person of bankrupt ni tak boleh pergi overseas, tak boleh kira nama memang masuk dalam senarai tu lah dia bankrupt tu memang tak boleh buat loan lah. And cannot go anywhere, duduk kat dalam Malaysia dia memang tak boleh pergi Okay, itu ialah reducing debt to judgment. Enforcement and collection. Okay, enforcement and collection ni pun boleh jadi banyak cara juga Satu, dia outright seizure of a property for the purpose of settling debt. Dia ambil je, dia jual, dia lelong, sold at public auction pun boleh Garnishment, ambil third party withhold funds owed to a debtor to be applied against a judgment. Let's say you hutang bank tapi ada orang hutang you juga. So bank akan ambil daripada third party tu Equity receivership, ada receiver to take control of the asset. So orang lain yang take care of the business so that dapat cash dan boleh bayar bank dengan creditor, equity receivership. And semua benda ni apa yang dia buat ni dia will charge to the customer juga Bank dia tak bayar benda ni, nampak je dia panggil orang buat kan. The payment semua will be borne by the customer tu juga. Or public sale. Forced liquidation of collateral by banks through legal action ataupun dia repossess the asset and resell it, hire purchase ambil balik kereta, jual balik. Okay, ini cara dia akan buat. This is how bank take control of their loans. That is why it is very important and sometimes different bank dia ada different practice Sebab tu kita tengok tadi bila when we go back to this step tadi. Okay, step ni sini kan credit evaluation ni different bank dia ada different policy. So different policy ni lah yang akan determine the loan recovery technique mana dia akan pakai. Okay, so depending on the commercial banks itself. Some very strict, some tu tak berapa nak strict. So I don't know. Saya tak pernah lah pula loan saya sampai ke sini. Semua kat sini je. So I have no practical experience. Saya cuba dengar-dengar information dari banks lah bila ada case loan recovery ni. Okay. Alright, ni last sekali. Buat macam ni tak cukup minta tadi kan. Like I said, hutang dia 2 million, dia cuma lepas dah jual aset apa semua ni, semua dah buat ni, bank hanya dapat recover 1 million. Lagi 1 million bank, orang tu tak boleh bayar So to declare a borrower as a bankrupt, bank has to apply for a court order. Bank tak boleh declare orang tu bankrupt. Court yang akan declare orang tu bankrupt. So they apply for court order for bankruptcy. Bila dah order for bankruptcy, jangan ingat bank tu dah macam mana nak cerita. Let's say dia dah kata bank pergi court file for bankruptcy untuk certain customer. Bila dia kata, tadi ingat customer tadi ada hutang 5 million kan? Bila dia file bankruptcy dekat customer ni, dah jatuh title bankruptcy lah, dah tak boleh buat loan, all the assets semua dah kena ambil dah, tak ada apa dah ni, selai sepinggang, apa pun tak ada. At the same time, dia masih lagi kena bayar yang 1 million tu. Jangan pula ingat dia dah declare bankrupt, orang ni tak payah bayar. Tak. Declare bankruptcy tu sebab apa? Sebab dia nak make sure ada orderly manner in the repayment of debt. Bayarlah RM50 ke sebulan, tapi still kena bayar sampai mati. Kalau dah file sampai bankruptcy ni, if you ada guarantor, the guarantor sekali akan dapat title bankrupt tau. This is especially for business, so you have to be really careful. So dalam case ni, kalau untuk yang dah di-declare bankrupt ni, so court akan appoint creditors committee, appoint trustee, take care of the borrower's asset kalau dia ada asset lagi. So dia orang lain yang jaga asset dia. So trustee akan liquidate the asset and divide the proceeds among many creditors. Ini kalau business lah, especially for business dia ada ramai creditors, semua asset dah kena jual untuk bayar hutang. Okay. So nak file for bankruptcy pun bukan senang So these are the step tadilah yang saya explain dekat sini. These are the step Pergi ke court dulu. Appoint creditors committee. Appoint trustee take care of asset, liquidate dan divide among creditors. Cukuplah duit nak bayar untuk semua creditors yang dia hutang tu. Kalau tak cukup, then dia kena bayar lah. The balance dia kena bayar. Alright. So this is again for loan recovery technique ni, it is actually under the asset quality. Remember, we're still talking about loan and advances. So kita tahu bank ada banyak loan and advances. The big chunk of their liability comes from loan and advances. So apa yang berlaku ialah they really have to manage their liquidity and also the problem loan management. Kalau ada loan memang kena monitor, especially the credit process, the policy and the bank's policy when giving credit. The red flags, and also how do they want to recover the loan. So last but not least, kita ada performance evaluation of banks. So overall, we have looked at the capital of the bank. Kita juga dah tengok the liquidity management of the bank. So kita tahulah this is not easy for a bank to manage their liquidity, especially the loans, especially for commercial banks. Commercial bank memang banyak bagi loan, so they really have to have a solid kita kata credit policy. Last one is the performance evaluation of banks. How do we evaluate the performance of commercial bank? So the typical statement ataupun the typical statement of financial position of a commercial bank, you all can refer to your bank juga. Ada assets, these are the assets. These are the liabilities. So kita dah tengok aset dia banyak dekat sini kan. Ini yang paling tinggi biasanya. And the liability ini yang paling tinggi. Okay. And kita dah cover juga about the share capital and also reserve. So untuk hari ni kita actually cover every element dekat sini lah because kita tadi buat kan dia ada statutory deposit with DNM, dia kena ada. So dia kena ada deposit from other banks tadi kan, dia ada bankers acceptance semua and also other liabilities. So kita dah tengok each item ni to make sure that the banks can perform well. So the income statement of a bank ni kita tak tunjuk, I will go into the statement of financial position, asset liability kita tak tengok, tapi kita nak tengok the income statement dia, profit or loss statement dia. Paling penting is this is the part yang memang sangat important for the bank, the NII dia, the net interest income. Okay, how do we read this? This is actually from interest income tolak interest expense, kita akan dapat NII, net interest income. So when we add with other operating income, that will give us net income. Tapi the important part is this part. NII ni mestilah positif. Kita nak make sure interest income kita lagi tinggi dari interest expense. Okay. So tolak-tolak semua ni dapatlah profit ataupun loss. So this is the extract from, I think this is CIMB juga. So you can see from here, dia ada interest income, dia ada modification loss apa semua ni, dia ada interest expense. Sini. So non-interest income dia, net interest income dia, net interest income sini. Okay, this is the NII, positif kan? So which is good. Dan naik pula dari 2019 ke 2020, so which is good. So nanti in your financial statement pun boleh tengok lah the NII, we call it net interest income. Okay, so the net interest income ni, yang ni kita panggil, we call it as a spread. NII ni, we call it as a spread. Maksudnya, it is a difference between interest income and interest expense. Okay, so the more the explanation is that the more loans are given out, the higher the chance of interest income provided the interest expense. Nampak tak? Dia bagi loan banyak, bagi banyak interest income dia dapat kan? Dan interest expense ialah interest yang dibayar kepada depositor. In control lah, maknanya bila kita simpan duit dekat bank, bank akan bayar kita interest. At the same time, bila kita buat loan dengan bank, kita akan bayar bank interest. So what they want is that the interest income received from the loan is higher than the interest expense paid to the depositor based on their savings account. So mestilah increase dan mestilah positif. They call it spread, nama dia spread. The higher the spread, the better. Spread ialah, ini formula spread, spread dalam bentuk percentage. Interest income tolak interest expense ataupun NII tadi divided by total asset. So the higher the better. Okay, I have one question dekat sini maybe kita boleh kira terus ataupun boleh maybe you can kira terus lah kot. I have two banks here, Bank Gold and Bank Elegance. This is the interest income, interest expense untuk both banks. This is the total asset. Sebab tadi formula dia macam ni spread. So I want you to compute the spread untuk kedua-dua bank ni. Cuba kira tengok berapa persen dapat untuk Bank Gold, berapa persen dapat untuk Bank Elegance ni. Okay? Or you need to see the formula. This is the formula NII divide by total asset je. Give me percentage for Bank Gold and Bank Elegance. Dapat tak? How many percent for Bank Gold?
.68.
Okay, itu Bank Gold. Bank Elegance?
3.48.
Okay, so you just ambil net interest expense and net interest income divide by total asset Alright, so let's look at the answer kat sini. Okay, thank you Lukman. So untuk Bank Gold is 4.68 untuk Bank Elegance 3.48. The answer would be in percentage So bila kita dapat nombor yang macam ni, we can comment because the question also asks you to comment kan. Kita nak evaluate the performance of the bank. Okay, in this case, we can say that Bank Gold is better sebab dia punya spread is higher 4.68 is higher than 3.48. So dia lagi bagus lah, kita kata dia more profitable than Bank Elegance. Tapi ini if you are given the NII ataupun nak kira spread sahaja, kita tak dapat the overall ratio lagi So based on this information, we can conclude that Bank Gold is better. Okay, very simple formula untuk NII ni. Even untuk your financial statement pun you can calculate the spread. Spread dia tak kira dalam notes to account. I don't think dia ada calculation of spread ni So you boleh kira sendirilah nak tengok your bank tu bagus ataupun tidak Okay, last one is the ratio part Ratio ni saya tak tunjuk the calculation lah. I just give you the formula sebab nanti this will be your assignment your third assignment nanti saya upload the question. Alright, so last one is the financial ratio of financial institution. So these are the ratio. Kalau ingat tadi, kita dah tengok daripada depan tadi kan, saya dah letak ada different types of factor kan yang kita nak tengok to assess the performance of the bank. So we are talking about the capital adequacy, management soundness, profitability, liquidity, and also asset quality. So we have actually covered all these 5 points already But for the financial ratio, kita ada, we call it a camel framework Camel bukan unta, camel lah camel sebab kita pakai huruf dekat depan dia. So ini semua kita dah cover tadi So you know already apa dalam capital adequacy, apa dalam asset quality, apa dalam management soundness, apa dalam earnings performance, apa ada dalam liquidity. So we call it camel framework So untuk capital adequacy, kita tengok tier 1 tadilah. To look at the capital capital fixed asset dia, because we want to know that the bank is able to cover their unexpected loss. Okay, and then the second element is the asset quality. Kita tengok juga tadi asset quality kan, high asset quality. Remember the weight untuk risk tadi kan, okay, high asset quality. And then the management soundness, kita tengok juga macam mana management soundness based on their administrative expenses. Okay, and then the earnings performance, tengok the profit dia. And last but not least is the liquidity. So these are actually the formula. For your assignments nanti, I want you to, saya belum letak lagi soalan but for your assignment nanti, I want you to follow this formula untuk compute. Contoh for capital adequacy, kita ada 2 ratio. Ini pun saya dah tunjuk awal tadi kita ada CCR dan juga RWCR ni. So kita pakai capital base which is tier 1 plus tier 2. CCR kita pakai tier 1 sahaja. Ini bukan total risk tolak this is risk weighted asset ni. Dia cara tulis tu dia adalah dash ni. So for asset quality, kita nak tengok NPL. non-performing loan. Some banks dia tak guna term non-performing loan, so you have to be careful. Some banks dia guna term credit impaired loans. So nanti dia tanya saya pula, doktor tak ada pun NPL? Impossible tak ada. Ada, tapi dia pakai term lain. Some banks dia guna NPL, some banks dia guna credit impaired loan. Okay. And then for asset quality kita ada loan deposit, loan to deposit. So formula dia kat sini. And also deposit to shareholder fund. Kita ada management soundness. Kita ada earnings, ada ROA, ROE, net interest margin and also spread untuk earnings performance. So ini ialah net interest income. Ini ialah spread, nampak? Dia akan pakai same formula dekat bawah ni. And last one is the liquidity. Loan to total asset dan liquid asset to total asset. So these are the ratio. Nanti I think maybe I will spend some time to discuss with you your last assignment, assignment 3. Sebab tu tak ada dah assignment, memang nampak macam banyak because setiap assignment tu akan follow the topics. Habis topik baru kita buat apa ni, assignments. Alright, any question tak?
Doktor.
Ya.
Nak tanya. Untuk kalau kita nak buat loan kan, memang perlukan guarantor ke?
Tak semestinya, sebab tu dia tengok 5C tadi kan. Dia tengok dekat 5C tadi ni, nampak mana tadi tu saya tunjuk tadi. Tak semestinya. Kalau orang tu ada sini 5C tadi, katakan dia ada good salary slip ataupun good financial statement business dia, dia boleh ada collateral. And then collateral ni pun tak semua dapat collateral, tak semua loan perlukan collateral dan tak semua loan perlukan guarantor. Dia depends on the capacity ni, mampu bayar balik ke tak. Kalau nampak macam muda lagi ke, ataupun tak pernah buat hutang ke, then you need a guarantor. So depends, the credit evaluation process ni depends on bank juga, depends on how much you want to make loan, and also depends on whether itu loan yang pertama ataupun loan yang kedua, ketiga dah. Okay, siapa tanya ni saya tak perasan apa.
Okay, doktor, thank you.
Okay, so not all loan perlukan guarantor. Tapi biasanya for first timer, tak salah saya ada. Deh. Muda lagi kan. Dia tengok age. Ini pun depends on banks. Some banks memang nak guarantor. Because they consider you are considered young, and mungkin pada dia when you're young, and then the way you manage the cash pun mungkin perlukan guidance lagi that is why you need a guarantor. To remind, sometimes tu bukan untuk apa, untuk remind untuk bayar kan. Boleh bayar tapi lupalah, buat lupa lah kan. So you need the guarantor. Okay, any other questions? Kita ada hutang ni tau, 3 group yang belum present di Islamic banking kan. Kita ada Murabahah, Mudarabah, 2 ke 3. Dengan Tawaruk. 3 group lagi. Are you all ready to present today? Make it short, 5 minutes each. Present Islamic banking je. The sources and uses of fund tu nanti kita tengok macam mana. Ada tak kumpulan Tawaruk, Mudarabah and Mudarabah pula. Murabahah and Murabahah and Mudarabah. Saya tak ada nulis dengan saya.
Ada, doktor.
Ada kan? Okay, can we start with, kalau tak ada apa-apa soalan, saya nak terus proceed dengan Islamic banking presentation je, boleh
Boleh, doktor.
Okay, so 2 minutes for you to get ready. Kita start dengan Tawaruk dulu. Okay, can we have the first group to present your Islamic banking contract?
Doctor, can we start first?
Boleh. Siapa yang ada tu boleh start dulu.
Okay.
Just share your screen.
Okay,
Dah
Assalamualaikum.
cakap ke tak?
Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening. My name is Adrina Anissa and my group member is Si Wen Ling and Chong Shini. So today I'm going to explain about the Mudaraba. Okay, the definition of Mudaraba is derived from the Arabic word daraba, which means business journey. Mudaraba is a sort of partnership in which one side give finance while the other supplies labor and management expertise. Okay, as a result, there are two parties involved, which is the capital supplier and the management. So the person who supplies funds is referred to as a Rabbul Mal or capital supplier. And the co-worker is known as Mudarib or manager. Prior to the arrival of Islam, Mudarabah was a common practice in Arab society. So during the pre-Islamic period, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, engaged into a Mudarabah contract with Khadijah. May Allah be pleased with her. So next is mechanism applied in Islamic banks in Malaysia. So a bank will provide the necessary funds for a project under a name of Mudarabah contract. So while the entrepreneur contribute labor and skills, profit and losses from the project are split at a set ratio between the bank and the entrepreneur. So financial losses are wholly borne by the bank, whereas entrepreneur liability is limited to their time and effort. However, in circumstance of provide carelessness or mismanagement by the entrepreneur, they may be held liable for financial losses. So the example of Mudarabah is commonly used as an underlying contract for various Islamic deposit and finance product such as saving account, investment account, project financing, working capital financing, Mudarabah, Suku and Takaful products. And then we also have Mudarabah investment account structure, which is the Mudarabah contract is a partnership contract whereby the depositor or customer is known as Rabbul Mal, okay, who is seeking the investment opportunity and will invest through the bank that is known and act as Mudarib, who manage the fund. So the partners will share profits according to the agreement lah between the bank and the customer. Okay, so and then we also have Mudarabah project finance structure. So the Islamic banks and customer, they will enter into a Mudarabah contract for financing Mudarabah venture. So the Islamic bank contribute 100% capital in Mudarabah venture. And then the customer acts as fund manager and provide his management and labor skill. So as per the Mudarabah contract, both parties agree on profit sharing ratio at the time of contract execution. And then at the maturity of Mudaraba contract, both parties are at the parties are at liberty whether they dispose of Mudaraba asset by selling it in the market or fund manager. So in this case, the customer lah, and then they buys the asset at the market value. That's all from me. Thank you.
All right, okay, thank you. Can we have next group, please?
Assalamualaikum, Doktor.
Ya.
Okey, sekejap.
Tak dengar tengah bercakap ke? Tak cakap ke?
Dengar tak? Hello? Hello? Doktor?
Ya, dengar.
Okey, dengar. Okey. I'm from group 1. I want to present about tawarruk. What is tawarruk? Tawarruk is a financing arrangement where customer will be receiving cash at the end of it for his needs through a series of sale transactions. How tawarruk is done? The bank will purchase commodities from a supplier first sale and sells them to customer second sale. The customer then will sell the commodities to a different supplier to get the required cash, third sale. What commodities could be used in tawarruk? All commodities except for gold and silver are suitable for tawarruk, but usually metals, palm oil, and others are being used. Mechanism: a customer needs cash and requests the Islamic bank to finance. Instead of financing in cash, the Islamic bank purchases the commodity from the seller and sells it to the customer through Muraba contract. After getting the ownership and taking possession of the purchased commodity from the Islamic bank, the customer sells the commodity to a third-party purchaser on spot payment basis. The price paid by the third-party purchaser on the spot fulfills the need of liquid cash of the customer. Later, the customer pays the deferred price to the Islamic bank pursuant to the agreed upon terms. Applied: working capital financing, project financing, credit card, and personal financing. Example of tawarruk: the bank purchased the asset from the supplier by cash payment at the price sale. Then the supplier transferred the ownership of the asset to the bank, and bank resell the asset back to the customer. That customer will pay the asset with deferred payment such as the price sale plus the profit margin agreed by both parties. At the same time, the customer sell the asset to third party and the third party purchases the asset by cash payment. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, alright, thank you. Ada lagi satu group lagi last one.
Assalamualaikum, Doktor. Dengar tak? Okay. Assalamualaikum, everyone. Today, our group will present about Murabaha. Murabaha is a contract wherein the Islamic bank, upon request by the customer, purchase the asset from a third party, supplier, vendor, and resell it to the customer either against immediate payment or on a deferred payment basis. Murabaha financing is the sale of goods at cost plus an agreed profit. Okay, next is stages of Murabaha contract. The first one is promise. The transaction parties must be genuine. The nature of business must be in scope of the Murabaha, and it should be halal as well. Deferred payment not permissible in case of gold, silver, and currencies. After this consideration, limit may be approved. After credit approval, the bank will sign Murabaha agreement. Sharia status of this agreement is promised MOU. Okay, next is agency. The client orders the institution to buy certain goods for him and sell him the same after acquiring. The prerequisite is that the goods are not already owned by the client. At this stage of Muraba financing, the customer promised the institution to buy the goods which were acquired by the institute on his request. Next is acquiring position. Once the customer purchased the good, the risk of the good transfer to the bank. Bank can now sell this good to the customer. Please note that the customer play two different roles in this transaction. One that of bank's agent and other of purchaser. This role should be clearly segregated to make the transaction halal. And then the last one is execution. Institution must take constructive or actual possession of the product being sold. Good must exist at the time of execution of Muraba Contract. Okay, application of Muraba Contract in Islamic finance. Murabah is one of the most widely used contract at present in Islamic banking and the investment sector. The various products where Murabah is applied are as follows: home financing, vehicle financing, working capital financing, project financing, goods financing, trade financing, LC based on Murabah, Murabah based sukuk, profit rate swaps, Islamic fund, and credit card. Okay, example of situation. Ahmad would like to buy a boat that sells for $100,000 from Ahmad's boat shop. To do so, Ahmad would contract a Murabah bank that would buy the boat from Ahmad's boat shop for $100,000 and sell it to Ahmad for $109,000 to be paid in installment over a 3-year period. The amount Ahmad pays is a fixed amount to a bank that owns the asset and there is no interest charge involved. Also, if Ahmad default on any payment, there are no additional charges that he will incur. The additional amount Ahmad pay over the cost price from the boat shop is in effect a 3% loan. But because it is offered as a fixed payment without any additional cost, it is allowed by Islamic law. That's all from our group. Thank you.
Okay, alright. So kita dah habis semua group dah present the Islamic contract untuk apa tadi? Uses and sources of funds for commercial banks. Nanti saya tengok kita mungkin kena schedule balik lah on the presentation. And then saya lupa nak remind dekat group, I don't know you all perasan ke tak dekat chat pun sudah letak ni. I actually schedule for a quiz commercial banking quiz starting yesterday sebenarnya sampai hari Friday ni. So you have 5 days untuk buat 15 minutes bila dah attempt So very simple question dekat platform My Guru macam biasalah. So kalau yang dah buat, saya belum tengok lagi ada buat ke belum So yang belum buat, so you still have time until this Friday untuk buat commercial banking quiz. Kalau tak ada apa-apa soalan, I will see you next week. Next week ada kelas lagi kan, because next week belum terpusam. So I will see you next week. Lama sikit kelas kita hari ni So jangan lupa buat quiz hari Friday dia malam. Kalau tak boleh view ke apa, please let me know sebab notes tadi pun tak boleh nak download tapi saya dah upload balik dekat My Guru. So please check dah boleh download from My Guru or not. And also the quiz lah, kalau tak boleh view, let me know. Alright, that's all for today. Thank you.
Okay, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Alright.